Mr. Rogers was a pioneer in the field of children's programming, and his show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood set the standard for public education television. He brought a unique approach to the medium by speaking directly to his young audiences through the camera. His goal was to provide a safe and nurturing space for children to learn about the world around them, including their own emotions. Through his program, he tackled difficult topics like death, divorce, and war, helping young viewers understand and cope with these complex issues. But who was Fred Rogers? And how did a boy from small-town Pennsylvania become one of the most influential figures in children's entertainment? Join me as we explore the life of Mr. Rogers and piece together his inspiration for his iconic and beloved television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Nestled in the scenic Ligonier Valley, Latrobe, Pennsylvania boasts a rich history dating back to its founding in 1854. Though now it's a quiet suburb of the greater Pittsburgh area, Latrobe was once a bustling town along a main railroad artery in the heart of the Steel Belt. Thanks to the Ligonier Valley Railroad route, Latrobe's population exploded as it entered the 20th century, reaching its peak of over 10,000 people by 1930, a remarkable number for a tiny Rust Belt town. Of course, all of these people needed a mode of local transportation, which led to the creation of two interurban trolley lines, the Westmoreland County Railroad and the Latrobe Street Railway Company. In their day, they were the premier mode of transportation for outlying village residents needing transportation into the city, and riding on a streetcar was an event. People would don their Sunday best just to ride the trolley. During this era, a young boy named Fred Rogers roamed the streets of Latrobe, enamored by the Toonerville trolley that chugged along the tracks to Pittsburgh. It may have been here where the seeds for his future television show were planted. As he later recalled,
"But those were the days when there were very few cars in Latrobe. But I just loved trolley."
Throughout his show, Mr. Rogers often spoke fondly of the golden age of the American trolley network. The neighborhood trolley was a central element of the show, bringing the cast together in each scene. And in many ways, the trolley mirrored the early streetcar's role as a melting pot of suburban America. Fred Rogers' close-knit family played a significant role in his upbringing. His father James was an entrepreneur who started as a mason, and his mother Nancy was a skilled seamstress who would knit personalized sweaters for the family every Christmas. Fred treasured these sweaters and often wore them on his show, carrying on her memory long after her passing. Raised as an only child until the age of 11, when his baby sister Elaine was adopted, Fred found solace in solitary activities and organized shows featuring his stuffed animals and dolls, set to the music of a small pump organ that he received at the age of 5. From a young age, Rogers displayed a remarkable ability to play tunes by ear, and with the encouragement of his grandfather, he would use the music as an escape from the troubles of his daily life, of which there were many, especially when it came to school. As a boy, Fred struggled to make friends due to being overweight and shy, but he coped with this by creating his own land of make-believe at home, with his puppets and stuffed animals. Things changed for him in high school when he befriended sports star Jim Stambaugh. Jim made sure that Fred had friends and helped him gain his own confidence. From these experiences, Rogers learned the value of networking, and how having a genuine interest in another person's passions can create the most unlikely of friendships. After high school, Fred went on to attend Rollins College, where his passion for music allowed him to shine. His college years went by quickly, and in the spring of his senior year, he had made up his mind to return to his hometown to pursue becoming a clergyman. His plans changed, however, over spring break when he watched television for the first time. He sat astonished as he watched cheap gags play out in front of his eyes. Rogers saw the wasted potential of television as a tool for education, and was determined to make a difference. Fred Rogers' determination to change the television industry took him to New York City, where on October 1st, 1951, he landed a job with NBC. Despite the abrasive nature of the showrunners, Rogers found a bright spot in his work with the show Opera Theater, which showcased different musicians and composers. Sticking it out through the rough days, he was eventually promoted to floor director, running lights and camera, and perfecting timing for actor cues. During this time, he also worked on several other shows, including The Gabby Hayes Show, Your Hit Parade, and The Kate Smith Hour. Despite his success with the company, Rogers left NBC in November of 1953 due to their lack of interest in producing educational programming. While Fred Rogers was busy on his mission in New York City, a battle over television broadcasting was brewing in Pittsburgh. With the Federal Communications Commission freezing the issuance of new television station licenses due to high demand, companies scrambled to acquire the few licenses available. In Pittsburgh, the sixth largest media market at the time, the Dumont television network, WD-TV, held a monopoly over local programming. But companies like Westinghouse Electric Corporation sought to challenge its dominance. However, Westinghouse could not secure a license, and its broadcasting equipment and infrastructure sat unused. While this failed insurrection occurred, Pittsburgh Mayor David Lawrence saw an opportunity for the city to develop its own public broadcasting station. And with some political connections to President Truman, he was able to obtain a channel license, on the condition that the city provide the necessary equipment and funding. Westinghouse and the city began talks on how they could mutually benefit from diversification of the television rights in the city. But unfortunately, they were never able to come to an agreement. Instead, Mayor Lawrence was able to convince Westinghouse CEO Gwilym Price to donate its equipment to the city for the establishment of WQED, the first publicly funded broadcasting network in the U.S. When he arrived in Pittsburgh without a job, Rogers contemplated joining the clergy, a vocation he had been postponing since high school graduation. However, fate had other plans for him, and he became one of the first people hired at the emerging television station WQED. Along with his co-star Josie Carey, Rogers was tasked with creating content that catered to young children. With a budget of just $150 a week, Fred and Josie got to work and created the Children's Corner. Given their meager budget, they had to make do with a minimalistic stage setup that featured only hanging sheets and a coarsely painted cuckoo clock. On the eve of the show's premiere, network executives hosted a potluck, during which producer Dorothy Daniel gave each attendee a present. To Rogers, she presented a small tiger puppet, which he lovingly named Daniel. Finally, the day arrived, and on April 1954, Josie Carey stepped in front of the camera and sang the show's opening song.
Why, hi, don't I know you? Why, hi, I'm sure I do. Why, hi, you know me too. Why, hi, how do you do? Why, hi, I'm Josie. Why, hi, how do you do? Hello.
After her introduction, Josie went on to perform her monologue, which was interrupted by a small striped tiger that emerged from behind the curtain through a slit cut in the cuckoo clock. In a timid voice, the audience heard,
"Hello, Josie, it's 5:03 and Columbus discovered America in 1492.
As Josie turned around, she saw Daniel S. Tiger poking out from behind the clock. This moment set a precedent for every episode that followed. After Josie's introductory song, she would converse with her puppet co-stars for almost an hour, and amazingly, almost everything the crew did was ad-libbed. As time passed, Rogers added more puppets to the show, including King Friday the 13th, X the Owl, and Henrietta Pussycat, among others, who would eventually appear on his iconic show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. During the Children's Corner, Rogers began to develop his signature style of gentle, passionate communication, which he would become renowned for in the years to come. Even through his puppets, the Mr. Rogers we have come to love was starting to reveal himself. The show would come to a close at the dawn of the 1960s, when both actors parted ways with the network. For Fred Rogers and his now family of 4, this meant making the move up to Toronto, Canada, where Canadian Broadcasting Corporation executive Fred Rainsbury was waiting. Rainsbury had invited Rogers to join the CBC crew for a 15-minute daily children's series. What Rogers didn't know was that he was going to be the face of the show, and not just a mysterious puppet-wielding, piano-playing man behind the curtain. Rainsbury had observed how Rogers interacted with children, and knew that this was something special. Thus, Rogers was tasked with creating content that would speak directly to children. It was during this time that Rogers first developed his signature interaction with kids. In a mix of piano, song, and puppetry, he spoke to kids on a personal level. He asked open-ended questions to prompt critical thinking and emotional responses from children, going above and beyond simply teaching them to count or to read. Rogers pioneered a method of speaking directly to the camera and addressing each child on the other end. This allowed him to create a personal connection with his young viewers, something that had never been done before. The show followed a simple format, with Rogers coming in singing "Won't You Be My Neighbor" before changing jackets and shoes. Most times he carried something with him that would function as a segue into the episode's topic. After a bit of intro and describing what and where the show will be, there would usually be a real-world field trip where he would show audiences what they could expect in that setting. Rogers found it imperative to introduce his audience to all aspects of the scene, describing what they might experience with all 5 senses. Rogers would then move to the neighborhood of make-believe. This part of the show featured guest stars interacting with puppet characters such as King Friday the 13th, X the Owl, or Henrietta Pussycat. The characters would teach children important lessons about friendship, sharing, and kindness. These lessons would typically coincide with what was going on in the real world during this episode. The episodes always ended with Rogers coming back to the neighborhood to talk for a bit before the closing of the show. Throughout each episode, Rogers encouraged children to process their thoughts and feelings in a healthy way. One unique aspect of the Mr. Rogers Show and later the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Show was its ability to tackle complex topics in a way that was understandable to young viewers. He taught them that it was okay to be sad, or angry, or afraid, and that there were always ways to cope with these emotions. In essence, the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Show was a carbon copy of the Canadian Mr. Rogers Show, with a few Americanized features and co-stars. After a few years, and with visas about to expire, the Rogers family headed back to the US. As a parting gift, Rogers was granted the rights to all of the Mr. Rogers ideas, music, and equipment. And in exchange, Rogers left behind a young, promising puppeteer, Ernie Coombs, who would carry on the Mr. Rogers legacy under a new name, Mr. Dressup. Rogers would make his way back to Pittsburgh, where after some time he would once again find himself under the employment of WQED, and this time he was there to stay. Finally, after decades of preparation, Fred Rogers was ready for his best work yet. The Mr. Rogers story is a true testament to the power of determination and the impact that one person can have on the world. Through his innovative approach to children's programming, he inspired generations of children to be kind, empathetic, and understanding. His show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was a safe space for children to learn about the world and their emotions, and he tackled difficult topics with grace and compassion. Fred's love for the trolley as a simple mode of transportation inspired the central element of the show, and he used his own experiences with music and friendship to connect with the audience. He devoted his life to making a difference through television, and his legacy lives on through the countless lives he touched. Fred Rogers' influence will continue to shape the world for generations to come. He was a true pioneer and mentor, but most importantly, he was the best neighbor anyone could ask for. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this trip down the boulevard of nostalgia. If you found this video interesting, feel free to leave a like, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel. I'm also on social media, where I frequently post news and history in the themed entertainment space. I'm at the TE Archives on Twitter and at Themed Entertainment Archives on Instagram. Links to all of my socials are in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to be a good neighbor, stay creative, and I'll see you on the next one.